Okay, you guys, this is a video on how to replace your stator and or regulator rectifier. And I'm going to start off with the symptoms of a bad stator and not a bad battery. So one of the first things that you'll notice about your bike is if you're having stator or regulator issues, is that the bike will have trouble starting up or it won't start. So you turn your bike on to accessory, you have the lights on and everything, you haven't started it yet, and if you notice that your gauge cluster and your fuel pump isn't as loud or as fast as it usually should be, or your instrument cluster isn't as bright, or your headlights aren't as bright as it usually is, that means your battery has been drained. Okay, so there's not the requirement of 12 volts going to those systems. So if that's the case, the first thing you want to do is you want to remove your seat cover, okay, and you want to get a voltage meter to check the voltage coming out of your battery. So right now, as you can see, it's at 11.1 with no systems on. The bike is turned off. There's no energy being drawn from it. It's 11.1. It should be at least 12. It should be like 12.3, 12.4, you know, something above 12. So right now, it's at 11.1. That tells me that, one, either the battery is bad, or two, when the bike is on, it's not being recharged as it should be. I have a 12 volt mobile battery pack set up right here. It's currently not turned on, but when it is turned on, it puts out 12 volts. So I'm going to be using that to jump the bike. Okay, so the battery wouldn't start in this condition. The battery's only outputting 11.7 when it should be outputting more than 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to help this out by turning on my 12 volt battery pack, and what you'll see is the voltage goes up to about 12.3, 12.4. That gives me enough power to be able to start the bike. So when I start the bike, if the alternator or regulator, or the stator or regulator is the issue, then this wouldn't be putting out what it is supposed to, which would be 14 to 15.5 volts, okay? So if this doesn't show 14 or 15.5 volts, then that tells you that the issue is not your battery. The issue is in the recharging system, which would be either the stator or the regulator / rectifier, okay? So I'm going to turn on the bike, and we're going to see what it says. Turn on accessory. The headlights drain a little bit of power, and I'm going to start the bike. Okay, so we know that it's not showing 14 or 15.5 volts. So we know that the battery's not the issue, and it's the regulator / rectifier. So I have the parts, and I'm going to show you guys how to go ahead and change those. Alright. So the first step in accessing the side of the stator cover is to remove 5 of these Allen bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry, there's only 4. And 2 of these push pins, one right here and one right here. Once you have the fairings removed, we can now remove the oil cap and allow for the oil to drain quickly. Now you're going to take a 17mm socket wrench and unscrew your oil bolt. Once your oil has been drained, we can now take off the stator cover. There's going to be 10 bolts on the outside, and there's going to be 1 bolt on the inside of this, so 11 bolts in total. So I'm just going to work in a star pattern here. Once I have the bolts out, I can now remove this first cover right here to reveal the little gears and the last bolt. So a couple gears came with it, and you have a washer right here. Make sure you don't lose that. So what I like to do is just keep all these parts together and set them aside for now. And there you go. There's your last bolt right inside there. My socket wrench isn't long enough to fit it, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this. And this one's going to be a little bit longer than the outside ones. See, these are the outside cover, this is the inside one. Alright, so now we're ready to remove the actual stator cover, so let's go ahead and pry that open. Okay, so I got the cover off. You're going to notice that there is a wire coming out right here. There's some gasket sealant on it because the little rubber piece going to the stator wasn't enough to hold the oil or keep it from leaking out, so we had to put a little bit of gasket sealant, and that's what I'm going to do again when I replace it. So go ahead and pull it off, and it will reveal your stator. So here's the stator, here's the gasket. What you'll notice is that these pins right here, or these coils, are burnt out. That's a sign of a bad stator. I got a kind of Chinese brand stator, so yeah, that kind of... If you want a good stator, spend the money, get the OEM, and you won't have this problem, hopefully. So yeah, bad coils, burnt out. That tells me that that's the problem right there, that the stator is the issue. So what I'm going to do now is remove these 3 bolts and remove this bolt up here, up top. To access the stator connector, you're going to unbolt this one pin that's usually right there. And I don't have one of those tank props, so I just use these bungee cords, 2 little bungee cords, and I suspend them to the back of the battery cover. And right here you're going to find your air filter. I already took it out. But it's usually going to be like this. And there's going to be 4 of these little clamps right here. You're going to have to access it from the side and unscrew 4 of these clamps that are connected to the intake right here. And there's also going to be 2 hoses that connects to this. One will connect, if it's sitting like this, like how it should be, one will connect right here on the side, and one will connect right here on the back. Right here. So once you have those 2 disconnected, you can remove this. It's going to look something like this. The wire is going to come from down here, that's the stator. Another wire is going to be coming from up there, and they're going to be connected right here. Mine's disconnected right now because I was trying to splice it with something, but here it is. This is your connector. It's connected to your regulator and your stator. Okay, now that you have disconnected the stator, we're going to disconnect the regulator, which is this box thing right here. There's going to be a bolt right here and a bolt right here, 2 bolts on it. It's on the side of your bike. Okay, now that I have my stator all set up in it, and this thing is nice and snug, I'm going to get my gasket, and I'm going to put a tiny bit of oil around it. Just a small amount of oil to lubricate it. Not too much oil, but just get your fingers a little bit oily and spread it around. Be careful when you're doing this, you want to split the gasket. Then from there, we're going to go ahead and put the gasket on. And now we're going to put the cover back on. So get this wire and put it up here, so it'll be a little bit easier later on when you have to deal with it. Watch out for these tubes, kind of try to push them out of the way, but make sure your gasket is nice and aligned. It's gonna be a little bit tricky because there's a magnet in there. One thing I help to keep the gasket aligned is to put bolts in the adjacent corners and attempt to put the case on like that. That usually holds the gasket in place. And another thing, after you get it where you think it's supposed to be, try to put these bolts in and try to barely turn them. If they don't go in freely, that means the gasket's in the way. You don't want to tighten down the case like that, or else you're gonna rip the gasket. So once you verify that the gasket is uniform all around the case, then you can tighten the bolts. Okay, so my camera ran out of battery, but what I did was I just put the stator cover back on and tighten it up in a star pattern, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And what we're going to do now is we're going to connect the stator wire to the regulator that we installed. That's just up in there, and once we do that, I'm going to put in some new oil, and then we can check to see if this thing actually works. Okay, so once again, I'm checking the recharging system. Everything is installed properly. I have to give it another jump just to get it started. And if this thing outputs around 14-15 volts, then the problem was solved. So let's see what happens. Turning the battery back on. Accessory. Okay, turning it on. Alright you guys, so there you have it. Successful installation of a new stator and regulator. I was able to do it under about an hour and a half. I've put about a few hundred miles on the bike since I've installed the stator, and it's been running perfectly, no issues whatsoever. Everything I expected it to be. So if you guys have any questions or anything, go ahead and leave me a message or a comment, and don't forget to rate and subscribe and share the video because it really helps me out. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.